Welcome to Winners Talks. This is an ADCE format that talks to the winners of the 2020 ADCE Awards. We're here with SuperHumans, which is an agency out of Rome, also Milan, right? Francesco and Alice from SuperHumans. Francesco is one of the partners of SuperHumans. And we're here to talk about one of the winners of 2020. You guys won, so congratulations. You won with Agnosis Collection, which is a project that you guys did for the World Alzheimer's Day, right? Last year. I'm going to get right into it. This is one of those formats that talks about creativity and talks about how you came up with the things that you came up, but especially how creativity happens. So let's start from the beginning and let's talk specifically about this project. What was the client brief on this job? Let's start with how you got to where you got to.
Hi there. We're actually EBRI, our client, had these massive issues about awareness. EBRI is one of the most important institutes about brain research, but people in Italy just simply never heard about it. EBRI was founded by Rita Levi-Montalcini, which is a Nobel Prize women, so yep. Very famous, but nobody knew about her foundation. They make research about Alzheimer, dementia, and other illness about mind and brain. So yep. They asked us to help them in order to reach a wider audience, to start a path in order to start asking donation in the future. This was just the beginning of something, actually. So this was the brief. It was a very wide brief. We didn't have actually one specific request. Just this. Just people don't know us. Please help us.
Nice. Yes, that's a good brief.
It was very good brief. We had to fill this bias, this gap from how famous is EBRI in the scientific community and how it's totally unknown from non-common people. So this was the brief.
So how did you get to this idea? I mean, the brief is very wide, right? It's awareness of the, let's say, association, right? Yeah. Awareness of what they do. And now you have a very wide brief and you have to get to something very specific. The project that you guys did is kind of an activation, right? Can we call it an activation? I would say it's an activation. So as an activation, how did you get to that point? I think it's a rhetorical question, but I think it's actually a really good thing to actually hear you guys talk about it.
Yes, we thought that probably the best point of view would have been to start from one of the most famous disease they research about, which is Alzheimer. And what we wanted to do is people know about Alzheimer in details, because even if it's a very famous illness, people don't actually know what it is, because people don't talk about it actually. So we started from famous sentences from Rita Levi-Montalcini. She said, "Don't worry if you don't remember where did you put your keys. Worry when you don't know what the keys are. What do you have to do with your keys?" So we decided we started thinking about, okay, what can we do in order to people to really understand these and the importance of these, because there was this thing they say that they told us in EBRI, which is, okay, research now, it's all about the body. In 50 years, we will have these amazing bodies, but we will be we will suffer from dementia.
From dementia, yes.
Yeah. So we wanted to put the accent on this. And
you wanted to, because what you're saying is the fact that EBRI was saying that the everything that is research driven right now is mostly driven onto making the body work better and live forever, but the brain is actually the part that people are forgetting about, which is actually interesting because forgetting is something that is part of the process. And I think it's interesting the fact that you are reminding, you were making people aware of the fact that it is a very important part of what is breaking down, quote unquote, when you talk about diseases that have to do with degeneration of the mind, right? Which is what you were talking about, right? Part of this was talking about words, which is, I think, the great thing about the aspect, and having people understand that the degeneration was about not being able to write a sentence or say a sentence, but not being able to understand what the words of that sentence are, right?
Yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So we came up with this idea of an activation because basically we thought that it was the best way to make people understand. So we wanted to make them experience a small part of the disease. And plus there was, of course, also a budget issues because it's not a commercial brand. They don't have so much money. So an activation in a small scale, but with a very PR potential, would have helped us to help them.
So difficulties were mostly budgetary problems, I guess. But how do you overcome a budgetary problem like this? Because projects like these have a very important aspect. They have an aspect that comes from the way you create that content, right? So the content that you create has to make people understand what the purpose of the content is, but it has to have people understand very strongly the emotional aspect of what you're trying to say, right? I think it is very interesting to look at your project and see how you're trying to make it human, right? I mean, your company is called SuperHumans, but I guess it's the humanity aspect of people understanding it on a human level, that words are important. So describe to me what the project in detail was about and how you actually went about doing it. How were there difficulties in actually putting together a project that brought to the ground, like you say in Italian, a terra, right? The aspect of bringing people in front of a word that doesn't make sense to make people understand what the actual disease is about. Does that make sense? Does the question make sense?
No, yes, it's very clear. But I think that I let Alicia. But I think that the definition "small scale" is crucial on this project, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible. We came up with this idea and we succeed probably because it was in a small scale, even if there was a very known brand of supermarket. You know very well Esselunga here in Italy, and so I think it was very famous brand, but in a small scale. So this is, I think, but
yes,
the
small scale helped us to solve the budget issues, and the other point you were talking about to make people into this, the key was mixing what was very familiar, which is the supermarket. You go there every day, you know everything, you put your pilot and go, with something very weird and totally unexpected, which is a product that looks familiar, but it's not at all. And that was the most interesting part in our creative works, finding the form of the object. I don't know if maybe I'm giving for granted that everyone who will see this video knows the idea. Probably have to describe it. I don't know.
You can describe it, because I think we will. Well, you can describe it. Yeah, describe it so that people understand, because it is very interesting the point of view that you actually took. So Go ahead, describe it so that it makes even more sense.
We have created 3 objects with with familiar colors and forms, but that doesn't actually need to anything. And with 3 names created with the same concept, something that sounds familiar, which Gidello, for example, Bralino, Luvetto, all these 3 names end with a very common in Italian end of a word, but they're nothing. They doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything, nothing. They're quite funny because I think there is one element in this on this campaign that is not. It's true that it's a romantic and human campaign, emotional campaign, but there is also something like, a little bit wild, a little bit funny, a little bit that this nonsense objects that quite would be, so people started smiling at this idea, laughing at this idea, because this object is nothing. In the supermarket with a price you have to buy, but you don't know actually what to do with them. So there is also a small ironic component in this idea.
Yeah,
I think it's I think the thing that is interesting is that there's an object. I mean, you keep on mentioning it, but I think it's interesting because a lot of projects that have to do with Alzheimer's have to do with words, which is what you guys actually came up with. But bringing it into an object, I think, is very interesting because it puts the 2 things together, and there's a little bit of an element of irony, which is what you're talking about, Francesco, right? There is a little bit of a smile that comes from the fact that when you don't know what you're looking at and what the purpose of that object is, it is funny to see the people in the case actually look at it and say, I don't know what this is, but it sounds familiar, it looks familiar, and I don't know whether I should comb my hair or put it on my shirt or whatever it is. So it's interesting because it is very complicated. I guess the question that comes to mind is, was that the most interesting part of the project? I mean, is that the coming up with the names and the object and how to explain it to people or how to sell it to people? Was that the most interesting part of the project itself? Well, because it was the core of it?
Probably creatively speaking, yes. But when we were working on this project, the biggest issues we feel was, okay, how can we switch the emotion from surprise to, oh, this is real, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
That's why we decided to film a video with real patients, managing a common object like a fork or something like this, a pen and a watch. And their reaction was actually the same healthy people had with our object. And so we put a monitor with this video in the aisle of the supermarket together with the object. So when people, once they had this reaction in front of our nonsense object and they see the same reaction of a lady in front of a fork, they realized how important this was, and every reaction was really touching in front of the video. People started crying. It was quite interesting to see how this switch worked in the supermarket.
I think the parallelism is actually very interesting, right? So you actually have a parallelism in the video itself, right? It starts with a woman that you don't see, which is kind of the emblem of what happens when you have Alzheimer's at a very let's say high level, let's say at a very high stage, right, of the disease, and you see how that person doesn't really know what the utensils that she uses to eat are, right? She doesn't understand or recognize the things that are normal to us. And when you actually do the parallel with the people that are in the supermarket, it all kind of comes together. You kind of go, oh, you go from smiling to being aware, and the awareness of it is very strong. I think it's much stronger because in the same way the woman in the video doesn't the woman you've interviewed doesn't recognize the objects, not recognizing those objects that have a weird name makes you feel stronger, the message that you're bringing forth, right? That you're bringing ahead. So I think it is very, very interesting the way the parallelism works. Was the campaign successful? Did it work for the client? Did it work for what your initial purpose was?
Yes. The client was really, really happy about the results, especially from the PR side, which was the main purpose of the campaign. Of course, people in the supermarket could also donate through the barcode of the object, not buying the object because it was a small scale.
But we had a lot of media. I think we had a lot of media, a lot of news about this activation. So yes, the main objective was, I think, done. So they are now a little bit more known than they were before. Even if I think this kind of thing, they need to be a continuity of, I think, a couple of years, so maybe 2 or 3, 4, 5 years. And this is very difficult because we have to convince them to continue on this direction. It's not very easy because they are, at the end of the day, they are scientists and they are very not communication people. So sometimes they understand it, but it's complicated. So you have to take it by hand.
I can't really congratulate you enough because it's actually, the project is actually really good, and obviously it won the ADCE, so it actually was liked by a jury and by the people that are that voted for it. But I think in general, projects have to get away from the jury rooms and have to work within the world of the communication that you're bringing forth. And I think that is actually what I think I like about this project, because it makes it tangible. It feels very tangible, and I can't really congratulate you enough because I actually really love the project myself. I have a question, which is actually a question that is very different from the ones that you would expect. Let's talk about, in general, about non-for-profit companies and companies that have an awareness to them. The question that they always ask me is, do you think that it is easier to work for a non-profit company than for a for-profit company? I mean, doing creativity and doing a strategic ad or project or activation for a non-profit company, is it easier than for a for-profit company? Good question, eh?
Yes, a good question. In my opinion, the difficulties is mainly about how known is the non-profit company or how unknown is. So this is the main difference, because I think it could be a little bit easier to make a campaign for, I don't know, Save the Children, because everybody knows Save the Children, they know what they do. It's a little bit more complicated to do it for EBRI, for example, this example that nobody knows what, no? Given that, I think this is the main difference to me in between profit or non-profit. How known is the brand? Because if you have between your hands a very known brand, very respectful brand, a fantastic brand, it's a little bit more easy to do something relevant, beautiful, creatively speaking also, I don't know, valuable for an award or something like that. I think this is the main difference. For the rest, I think it depends. So it depends on
the client, basically.
The people behind the client, the brand.
Which is exactly what I think was the point. I mean, it is true that non-for-profit clients are more, let's say, respectful of the fact that you sometimes are giving a lot of yourself into the project. More so than a for-profit brand, but the reality is that it really depends on the client, right? It depends on how much trust, how much courage, how much willingness to broaden the borders. In reality, it is true that, you know, a lot of the award shows, if we talk about award shows, put the category of awareness or social awareness or nonprofit into a whole different category, because they think that it's easier to do a nonprofit job, mostly because people are donating their time and money also. But I don't know if it's necessarily true that you actually have a nonprofit and you actually will do a really good job, right? It's not an easy.
I mean, also, I remember when I'm older than Alicia, of course, and I remember that in the beginning of my career in the early 90s, when you went to a non-profit company, a non-profit client, no, it was really, really easy to sell them stuff, because they knew that you were working for free. They were not so much structured by, there were not such, no, you know, there were many, sometimes they were made by volunteers. I don't know, it was small companies run by some volunteers, very good person. So you went with an idea, and they, 99% of the cases, they said, okay, let's do it. Thank you. You are working for free.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's totally different. When you go with an idea to a client, to a non-profit client or an organization that they call you or something like that, it's exactly the same process of a structured big client, because they have several levels of approvals and several. We made it one thing in these days for Medicine Sans Frontier, MSF. And it was really like, you know, working for a big company with several degrees of approvals, and like, you know, you couldn't do a lot of things because and the same client, I remember in the beginning of 90s, there were like, you know, 10 people doing okay, great. So this is also a big change.
It's interesting. It's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think it's true what you're saying, exactly what you're saying. I think even nonprofits evolved. There are a lot of different places where things happen. And I think also the fact that people are working for free or for cheap, or they're donating their time, even if they're, you know, it doesn't mean that you don't have to go through the processes that you have to go through usually for a profit client. But that said, I was curious about the answer to the question. Let's talk about SuperHumans for a second. In general, do you have, speaking of processes, do you have a process that you go through when you actually have to come up with an idea? Is there a methodology? Is there a way you actually look for inspiration? Is there something that you do to instigate the good idea, to instigate the good work, to make the people that work at SuperHumans participate in the best way possible in a project with their minds and with their inspiration? Is that it? That's another good question.
I'm not sure that we have a formula. The thing that I can say, we are not a jealous company. So everybody is, I think, is very motivated to share their ideas on the table. That was exactly what happened with this every campaign, and it happens every time. So when we have a good idea, we try to share and say, okay, folks, we have a good client here, a fantastic good initial insight. Let's do our best. And so all together, we try to transform it into a beautiful idea. Not all together, but I mean, many creatives. I know. I think this is the process that works, I think, better in that cases. But I don't think we have any other specific formula to now.
But everybody pitches in. Everybody pitches in, right? You don't have it's a growth process of the idea that comes from the fact that inspiration can come from every place, right? I think
exactly, and this is not always made like this, because I remember I was in for example, several years ago, I was in another international, companies, advertising agencies, and they were very, I don't know, the processes were very different, and people were very close in the rooms. And so you had the creative couple that they came up with an idea, and there was their idea, and nobody else would see them,
would touch it,
until the idea came up.
When I came here, in the very first days, happened this that was really surprising to me. I was with this copy, and she was pitching an idea, and then I said, yes, this is really nice, well done. And then she say, may I ask help to this other copy, because I think it's great to this, and I would like to work with him. Oh my God, really? You had this good idea? You want to work with another copy? Wow, it's something that never happened in any other place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, I think that I think today also it's like so interesting to see how inspiration and creativity seeps like into the little corners, of the jobs or of the idea creation that we go through. It's interesting that it can come from anywhere, right? Because there's so many places where people see things, and there's so many ways you can do certain things that sometimes it's the number of things together that actually bring a good idea. I think that it is very interesting to see how that comes to fruition. I think the ideas that are strong, like the one for the like the Agnosis collection that you guys did, are very strong. They are strong because you can see that they're compact. They work for what they need to be done. They are done creatively, productively for the purpose that they have. And I think, again, my congrats to you for having confections something, like having put something together that is so correct and doesn't want to say many things, but says one thing in many different ways so well, So again, I'm going to end with one question that I think we all kind of put in this, but I think you also answered this. But ADCE is also about young creatives around Europe. Do you have any suggestions, any tips that you want to give the young creatives that are getting into the business right now and are living through a moment that is not very easy, I would say, but it's also a moment in which, if you actually took me aside and told me to be positive, is probably also has its positive aspects. Is there anything you want to say to young creatives to actually have them be excited about what their future career can be in this business? Another difficult question.
Very difficult.
But there always will be the need of good ideas. So even if the moment it's not easier for the industry, I think ideas will always find a space.
And I think also another thing that probably there has been a time, probably 10 years ago, when if you were a very creative, young creative, okay, advertising would not be the best place to go. I think 10 years ago, probably you would prefer to go to, I don't know, other industries like video games or some music or something like that. I feel that now in this current period of time, again, advertising, let's say communication, okay, not precisely advertising, is again a place to be when you are a young person full with filled by creative ideas. It's becoming again a nice place to a nice territory where to spread your creativity.
I totally agree with you. I think it's a little bubbling, right now it's like bubbling a little bit. And I feel like because it's bringing together a lot of different aspects, anything that is brand related feels like it's going through something that is very big. And I think it's very different from what was happening, as you said, 10 years ago. So I think that's a very, very good positive note to end this talk on. I can't thank you enough, Francesco and Alice, for telling us about your project and for actually having us go through the project with us. And I wish you all the luck in the world. And you know, hopefully, maybe next year we'll talk again. How about that?
Pleasure. It was a pleasure, really. Yeah, so hopefully. Yeah, maybe.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, guys. Very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Ciao.